Deep in a snow-covered forest stood an old wooden cabin where Owen had lived in silence for years, hiding from the world and from the memories that never stopped haunting him. In his youth, he had loved Lily with a devotion that could have lasted a lifetime, but while he served his country, she was forced into the wealthiest and most ruthless family in the region. That loss became the wound he carried through every winter of his life. On a freezing night when everything seemed still, a sudden knock shattered the silence. When Owen opened the door, he stopped breathing. Standing before him was a young girl who looked exactly like Lily once did. In her shaking arms was Milo, a wounded dog fighting for strength. "Please, help us," she whispered. Owen didn't yet know that this moment would uncover a buried secret and change his life forever. Subscribe to the channel to experience the full story. The winter storm clawed at the cabin walls like a wounded beast. Deep within the old pine forest of Silver Ridge stood Owen's wooden cabin, a place forgotten by most but remembered fiercely by the man who called it home. Owen Callahan, 52 years old, broad-shouldered yet stooped by memory rather than age, had built this refuge with his own hands after returning from war. His face, carved with harsh angles and softened only by the graying beard that framed it, bore the quiet solemnity of someone who had witnessed too much, survived too much, and felt too little worth celebrating. His storm-gray eyes seemed permanently fixed on some point far behind the present moment, as if the past were a film he could not stop replaying. The war had left him with deeper scars than the ones that mapped his forearms. It had taken comrades, courage, and a part of his soul. But nothing wounded him as sharply as the memory of Lily. Lily Hart had once been the warmth of Owen's winters, a woman of delicate stature with chestnut hair that curled when wet, a gentle voice that could quiet even Owen's tempests, and eyes as bright as summer water. She was soft-spoken, tender-hearted, but strong in the way wildflowers survive storms, and yet even her strength had not saved her when the Ward family decided she would marry Malcolm Ward, Jr., heir to the richest and most ruthless family in the region. Owen remembered the day she disappeared from his life, her tear-rimmed glance over her shoulder, the grip of Malcolm's men on her arms, the helpless rage boiling in his chest. That day fractured Owen permanently, shaping the quiet, withdrawn man he had become. Tonight should have been like every other night of his solitary winters: silence, firelight, and the hum of regret. The wind battered the windows like fists demanding entry. Snow swirled so thick it erased the world beyond the porch. Owen sat in his wooden chair, the fire casting long shadows across the room, his hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee gone cold. The storm's roar merged with the storm in his mind, and he found himself drifting, not asleep, but somewhere between memory and reality. Then came the knock, soft, fragile. 3 taps, spaced apart like breaths struggling to stay alive. Owen froze. No one came this deep into the woods during a storm, not unless they were desperate or hunted. He set down the mug, its ceramic clink startlingly loud in the tense quiet, and stood. His heart hammered against his ribs, not with fear, but recognition. Something in that knock echoed in his bones. He approached the door cautiously. His hands, large, calloused, steadied by years of survival, rested on the latch. For a brief moment, an old dread clenched his chest. What if it was a ghost of the past, something he had tried so hard to bury, returning now to be reckoned with? The howling wind pressed at the door as if urging him to open it. He did. The storm exploded inward, flinging icy flakes against his face, but the cold was nothing compared to the shock that seized him as he looked out into the night. A girl stood there, thin, trembling violently, her breath fogging into the air like smoke from a dying candle. She looked no older than 14 or 15, her long brown hair tangled by the storm, her skin pale from cold and fear. Her clothes, a thin gray sweater beneath a soaked denim jacket, clung to her, offering little warmth. But her face— Owen staggered back a step. She looked exactly like Lily when she was young. Not merely similar, uncannily, unbearably the same. The same almond-shaped eyes, though these were reddened from crying. The same delicate jawline, though this one was clenched in fear. The same fragility wrapped around a spine of quiet, stubborn strength. Beside her leaned a German shepherd, limping heavily. The dog, Milo, as Owen would later learn, was young, perhaps 3 years old, with a thick sable coat now matted with snow and a wound on his shoulder that bled through the fur. Despite the injury, his posture remained protective. His ears were pinned back, his amber eyes sharp, warning Owen not to approach the girl without her permission. This was no ordinary pet. This dog had seen danger, understood danger, and was ready to take it on again if needed. The girl opened her mouth, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Please." Her lips were blue, trembling. "Please help us." Owen's breath caught. He hadn't heard that tone since Lily. Soft, desperate, brave in its breaking. Something inside him cracked, the same fault line that had split years ago when Lily was taken away. He ushered them inside without hesitation. The girl collapsed against the threshold as the warm air embraced her, and Milo limped in close behind, refusing to let her out of his sight. Owen shut the door quickly, locking out the storm but not the memories. For a heartbeat, the cabin went still. Owen knelt beside the girl, his hands hovering, unsure whether to touch her, afraid she might vanish like a dream. She looked up at him through wet lashes. In those eyes, shattered yet unbroken, he saw Lily again, saw the ache, the pleading, the echo of a promise he once failed to keep. "Who are you?" he whispered, unable to breathe. Her answer struck him like a blow straight to the heart. "My name is Nova," she said. "Nova Hart." Hart? Lily's last name. Owen felt the ground tilt beneath him. Memories, grief, hope, and dread tangled all at once. "Please," Nova whispered again, one hand reaching weakly toward him. "They're coming. They'll find us. Please, Owen. Save us." The moment her fingers touched his sleeve, Owen knew the truth with a certainty that chilled him deeper than the winter storm. Fate, relentless, patient, merciless, had returned to his doorstep, and this time he would not run. The storm still snarled outside, but inside the cabin the air held a fragile warmth, half from the fire, half from Owen's trembling hope that the girl who looked like Lily might still be saved. Nova sat near the hearth, wrapped tightly in a wool blanket far too big for her small frame. Her hair, long, chestnut brown, tangled from snow and panic, clung to her flushed cheeks. She looked fragile but not weak. Even in her exhaustion, there was a stubborn endurance in the way she held her shoulders, as if danger had taught her to stay ready for whatever came next. Milo lay pressed against her side, his breathing uneven, his ears twitching at every gust of wind. Despite his injury, he never once looked away from the door, as if guarding Nova were the only reason he had breath left. Owen crouched beside the girl, his large, calloused hands hovering uncertainly in the air, unsure how close he was allowed to get. He was not a man accustomed to comforting children, or anyone, for that matter. His life in isolation had carved deep lines around his eyes, making him appear sterner than he intended. But beneath that rough exterior was a man whose heart had been cracked open long ago. Now, seeing Nova sitting by his fire, he felt those old wounds throb awake. "You're safe now," he said softly, his voice a rumbling blend of reassurance and fear. "Take your time. Start wherever you can." Nova's lips parted, but only a cracked whisper escaped. She swallowed hard, her eyes, so identical to Lily's, glimmering with the weight of something unbearable. For several long seconds she seemed to fight herself as if speaking the truth might break her further. Finally she inhaled, a sharp, trembling breath. "My mother, Lily." Her voice quivered on the name as if every syllable cut her. "She told me about you. Not everything. Just enough that I believed you were the only person who could help me." Owen felt the world shift again, the edges of his vision tightening. He didn't want to interrupt her, didn't want to breathe wrong and make her stop. Nova pulled the blanket tighter, her thin fingers shaking violently. She died 3 months ago. She continued, staring into the fire as though afraid of seeing his reaction. It wasn't sudden. It was slow. Too slow. It was like watching a candle get smaller every day until one morning there was nothing left. Owen closed his eyes. A part of him had always feared Lily was gone, but hearing it spoken aloud by the girl who carried her face, it felt like losing her all over again. Nova took another breath, steadier than the last. Before she passed, she told me that if anything ever happened, if the Ward family ever became too dangerous, I should come find you. Her gaze lifted, meeting his. She said you were the only person she ever trusted. Something deep inside Owen shattered at the words. Grief, guilt, and a flicker of something like redemption tangled violently in his chest. She remembered me, he murmured, barely able to speak. Nova nodded. Every day. She never stopped. But then her expression darkened. She clenched the blanket, knuckles whitening. Her husband, Malcolm Ward, Jr. She said the name like a poison she wanted to spit out. He ruined her. Not all at once, piece by piece. He hurt her in ways that didn't leave bruises, but they broke her just the same. Owen's jaw locked. He remembered Malcolm well. Tall, handsome in a cruel way, with slick blonde hair, a self-satisfied smirk, and the kind of arrogance that came from being born into wealth. Even as a young man, Malcolm's temper simmered beneath his polished surface. Now, Nova continued, confirming everything Owen had always feared. He couldn't stand that she loved someone before him, the girl said quietly. He was obsessed with it. He thought she compared him to you every day. He would yell at her for things that happened years before they even met. He made her life a prison because he thought she still loved you. And she did. Nova's voice cracked. She always did. Owen felt the breath leave his lungs. The cabin seemed to shrink around him, closing in with suffocating memories. Nova wiped her cheek, suddenly angry at herself for crying. I found her journals by accident. I wasn't supposed to know. But once Malcolm found out, he said I needed to forget everything. He said Lily's past was a sickness that needed to die with her. Her hands trembled violently. So I ran. I didn't even have shoes on when Milo and I escaped the house. He chased us into the woods. His men, too. Owen looked at Milo. The dog lifted his head weakly, ears flattening at the memory. He was younger than Owen initially thought, maybe 2.5, and his thick winter coat told Owen he was used to the cold, but not to violence. Milo must have been Lily's dog, or Nova's protector long before tonight. His dark, amber eyes carried intelligence and a loyalty so fierce it almost hurt to see. "How far did you run?" Owen whispered. 3 miles. Maybe more. We hid under fallen trees. Milo fought off one of the men when they got too close. She stroked the dog's head gently. He saved me. He always saves me. The storm wailed outside again, as if punctuating her confession. Owen sat back, breath shaking. Everything inside him, rage, grief, shame, a buried love he thought had died decades ago, rose like a storm of its own. He had failed Lily once. He would not fail her child. He looked at Nova, this brave, terrified girl who carried Lily's face and Lily's courage. "You're staying here," he said firmly. "No one will take you back there. Not ever." Nova's eyes softened with something between trust and relief. For the first time all night, she leaned slightly closer to him, not out of fear, but safety. Outside, the storm continued its furious assault on the cabin. But for Owen, something inside had finally begun to thaw. He would not let the past repeat itself. Not this time. Not with Lily's daughter. Dawn had not yet touched the forest when Owen realized how bad Milo's condition truly was. The cabin's dim lantern light revealed the shepherd's wound more clearly. The gash along his shoulder was deeper than he initially thought, and the blood had clotted in dark patches on his fur. Milo, though exhausted, kept trying to rise, nudging Nova every time she shifted, refusing to rest until she did. But his whines, low, strained, forced through clenched teeth, made Owen's stomach twist. The dog was young, perhaps no more than 3, with a sturdy build and a beautifully thick sable coat, but the injury stole the strength from his normally confident stance. "We need to take him to someone who can help," Owen murmured. Nova, still wrapped in the oversized blanket, looked up with panic clouding her expression. "Is he dying?" she whispered, voice thin as frost. "No," Owen replied gently, though the certainty in his words came from hope more than knowledge. "But he needs proper treatment." There was only one person Owen trusted with a wounded soul, animal or human, Dr. Sophia Marin. The name alone stirred a mix of memory and respect. Sophia, now in her mid-40s, was a woman carved from resilience. Tall and lean, with a posture sharpened by years in military service, she carried her strength quietly. Her skin was sun-kissed from long hours spent working outdoors, and her raven-black hair, streaked with dignified silver strands, was usually tied back in a no-nonsense braid. Her eyes, piercing hazel, always aware, always assessing, held the intelligence of someone who had seen war break people open and spent her life stitching them back together. She was once a battlefield medic, a surgeon who could improvise with nothing more than thread and grit, and Owen had trusted her with his life more times than he could count. He helped Nova and Milo into the truck just as the storm dwindled to a harsh whisper. The forest road was blanketed in white, the tires crunching through the snow like brittle bones. Nova sat silently beside him, Milo's head cradled in her lap. She stroked his ears gently, whispering encouragement as if afraid that speaking too loudly would hurt him more. Owen kept glancing at her from the corner of his eye. The girl was too quiet, too still, signs he recognized from soldiers who had seen far more than they should. Trauma had a way of shrinking a person into themselves, compressing them into silence. When they reached the small veterinary clinic on the forest's edge, light spilled weakly from the windows. The wooden sign, Sophia Marin, DVM, swayed slightly in the wind. Owen knocked once before pushing the door open. Sophia was already awake. She stood at the counter, wearing a dark green thermal shirt beneath a worn medical apron, her sharp eyes lifting the moment she heard them enter. Even in the dim light, she seemed formidable. Not intimidating, but steady, grounded, a pillar forged through experience. "Owen," she said, her voice calm but edged with concern. "What happened?" Then her gaze fell on Nova, frail, frightened, her cheeks still streaked with drying tears. Sophia's expression immediately softened. "And who's this?" "Nova," the girl whispered, barely audible. Her posture stiffened under the attention, fingers tightening around Milo's fur. Sophia gave a gentle nod, neither prying nor pressing. She moved toward Milo with slow, deliberate steps, her hands steady and confident. "Let's take a look at your boy." Owen helped lift Milo onto the exam table. The dog whimpered softly but didn't fight. Sophia examined the wound with practiced precision, her brow furrowing as she cleaned the gash. "These aren't from a fall," she murmured. "These are claw or blade marks. Someone, or something, did this deliberately." Owen felt Nova flinch beside him. The girl lowered her gaze, arms wrapping around herself instinctively. Sophia noticed. Her voice softened. "Nova, sweetheart, you're safe here. No one's going to hurt you or Milo." Those simple words nearly undid the girl. Her eyes glossed with tears, but she nodded. As Sophia continued working, she unbuckled Milo's collar to clean the area around it. The collar, a sturdy leather one, was clearly handmade, preserved with care. But when she turned it in her hands, her eyes narrowed slightly. "What's this?" she murmured. The collar had a tiny seam, so subtle that anyone without medical or mechanical training might have missed it. Sophia's fingers, nimble and precise, traced the edge until it clicked open, revealing a concealed compartment, barely larger than a coin. Inside was a small, thin metallic object. Sophia did not hide her surprise. This wasn't made by an amateur. Someone wanted this hidden. Owen stepped closer, his heartbeat thudding. "What is it?" "I don't know. Not yet." Sophia slipped the item into her apron pocket, expression unreadable. "Let me finish treating Milo first." The shift in her voice, controlled, measured, told Owen she suspected something serious. Something she wasn't ready to voice in front of Nova. As the minutes passed, Sophia cleaned the wound, stitched it carefully, and wrapped the shoulder with clean bandages. Milo finally relaxed, exhaustion pulling him into sleep. Nova rested her forehead on the dog's fur, relief shaking through her small frame like a gust of wind. Before they left, Sophia placed a firm hand on Owen's arm. Her touch was steady, but her eyes held something heavier than concern. "Owen," she said quietly, "Lily didn't entrust Nova to you by accident. There's more here than you know." The words struck him like cold water. He didn't ask for clarification, not in front of Nova. But as they exited the clinic into the pale morning light, his chest felt tight, his steps slower. Back at the cabin, the fire was rekindled. Nova lay beside Milo, finally asleep, her features soft despite the storm inside her. Watching her, Owen felt a weight settle in his chest. Not dread, but a resolve sharper than anything he had felt in years. He had failed Lily once. He would not fail her child. Protecting Nova wasn't just a duty, it was the path toward healing the wound he had carried for half a lifetime. Night bled slowly across the forest, turning the pines into jagged silhouettes that swayed under the rising storm. Snow fell in thick, heavy sheets, each gust of wind striking the cabin like a warning fist. Inside, the fire crackled faintly, but its warmth could not break the chill creeping into Owen's bones. Something in the air felt wrong, restless, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. Nova had fallen asleep beside Milo, her small body curled close to the wounded shepherd. Even in sleep she trembled, fingers gripping Milo's fur as though it were an anchor. Milo, though exhausted, kept his eyes half open, the deep brown gaze tracking every sound outside. He refused to succumb fully to rest. His instinct to protect Nova seemed to burn hotter than his pain. Owen stood near the door, one hand pressed against the cold wood. The storm hummed beyond the walls, the kind of humming he recognized from long ago, right before mortar fire swallowed the night sky. His broad frame, once powerful from years of service, now carried the subtle stiffness of age and memory. Gray streaks cut through his unkempt dark hair, and the lines on his weathered face mapped years of guilt, loss, and the weight of promises broken. But on nights like this, the soldier inside him resurfaced, the man who could read danger from the mere shift of wind, who knew when eyes were watching from the dark. Just as he reached for the lantern to dim it, a slice of harsh white light swept across the window. Headlights. Too bright, too deliberate, too late at night to be anyone friendly. Owen's breath stilled. They had found her. "Nova," he whispered sharply. She startled awake, eyes wide and glossy with fear as Milo rose to stand, ignoring the flash of pain in his injured leg. His lips curled back, not in a growl yet, but in a warning. Low, vibrating, primal. "It's them," she choked out. Owen didn't ask how she knew. Terror etched into a child didn't lie. He pulled her gently toward the back of the cabin, lifting a heavy wooden trapdoor hidden beneath an old rug. A narrow ladder descended into a small shelter carved into the earth, a place he had once built for himself during nights when war haunted him too violently to sleep above ground. "Stay here," he said, his voice firm but warm, in a way Nova had never heard from an adult. "Do not come out until I tell you." "But what about—" "I'll handle it." Milo stepped forward and positioned himself at the top of the ladder, blocking the entrance with his body. Even injured, his stance was unyielding, ears pinned forward, eyes burning with loyal fury. "You too," Nova whispered, voice breaking. "Please stay safe." Owen closed the trap door, leaving only a thread of air and a promise he prayed he could keep. Outside, tires crunched against frozen ground, slow, purposeful, hunting. Owen grabbed his old rifle, its metal cold enough to bite his palm. The weapon was scarred, much like him, bearing scratches from years in the field. It had been silent for a long time, but tonight its weight steadied him like an old friend. Footsteps approached. 3 sets, heavy and unhurried. A knock didn't come. Instead, a voice rose through the storm. "Oh, Ian," the man crooned mockingly. "Come on out. We know you're in there." The voice was unmistakable. Vincent Ward, Ward Jr. The very name made Owen's pulse spike. Vincent, in his early 30s, was tall and bulky with muscles built from privilege rather than hardship. His blonde hair was slicked back despite the weather, giving him a predatory, almost wolfish arrogance. His square jaw and symmetrical features once made him appear like the golden boy of the Ward family, but jealousy had curdled his handsome face into something sharp and cruel. His ice-blue eyes revealed none of the charm he maintained in public. They were hollow, glassy, fueled by obsession and entitlement. Beside him were 2 hired men. One was short and thick-bodied with a crooked nose and stubble covering most of his chin. Dean, a local troublemaker known for doing the Ward's bidding. The other, taller and gaunt with long limbs and a patchy beard, Marlowe, had a twitch under his left eye that suggested nerves shattered long ago, probably from years spent doing violent work for the highest bidder. "We're looking for the girl," Vincent called, stepping closer. Snowflakes collected on his expensive coat without melting. "You know which one. The little brat who belongs to my family." Owen stepped onto the porch, rifle raised but not yet aimed. The wind whipped his jacket, but he stood unmoving, a silhouette rooted in defiance. "She doesn't belong to you," he said. Vincent smirked, tilting his head. "Everything in this town belongs to us. Even what my father couldn't keep." His voice dropped into something venomous. "Especially Lily's child." Owen's jaw tightened until his teeth ground together. "You made Lily's life hell," he said coldly. "You won't touch Nova." Vincent laughed, the sound sharp and delighted. "Protective now, are we? Funny, you weren't there when my father took her from you. Not much of a savior then, were you?" Owen's grip on the rifle steadied. "Now, I have a chance to do what I should have done years ago." Marlowe stepped forward, shotgun in hand. "Boss, just let me—" Vincent raised a hand. "No, I want him to say where she is." "I said," Owen repeated, voice iron, "you're not touching her." The storm screamed overhead like a wounded beast as the 3 men closed in, their shadows stretching across the snow. Owen's heartbeat slowed, not from fear, but from the clarity of a man who had walked through death before and refused to turn back. This time, he would not fail Lily. This time, he would not lose. This time, he would protect Nova, no matter the cost. The air outside had turned razor sharp, the storm's howl fading into a low moan as if the forest itself held its breath. Owen stood in the open doorway, rifle raised, his silhouette carved in the swirling snow. Vincent Ward Jr., flanked by Dean and Marlowe, stepped closer with cruel confidence. The porch light caught the glint in Vincent's ice-blue eyes, an arrogance sharpened into malice. But before the confrontation could break like a snapped wire, a thunderous command cleaved through the cold. "Enough!" The voice belonged to Sheriff Quinn. A tall man in his late 50s, Quinn had a stout build softened by age but strengthened by resolve. His square jaw was covered in gray stubble, and his uniform looked worn but respected. Deep creases framed his eyes, lines carved by years of witnessing what violence did to people, lines added to by Owen himself, the man who'd once saved Quinn's life in a military skirmish decades earlier. Tonight, Quinn's breath steamed in the frozen air as he marched forward with 3 deputies behind him, their flashing cruiser lights staining the snow blue and red. "Step back, Ward," Quinn ordered, his tone steely. "You're trespassing, armed, and threatening a civilian." Vincent scoffed, spreading his arms like a martyr in a bad play. "Sheriff, please. I'm retrieving my stepdaughter. This deranged old soldier kidnapped her." Quinn's expression didn't budge. "Save it for the paperwork." As he gestured for his officers to hold position, the snow crunched rapidly behind them. A figure hurried toward the cabin. Sophia. The old veterinarian's posture was stiff from years of combat injuries, yet she moved with determined urgency. Her dark hair, streaked with silver, was tied messily under her wool cap, and her sharp brown eyes blazed with purpose. In her gloved hand, she clutched something small. Milo's collar. "Owen," Sophia called, her breath uneven, "we need to talk. Now." The tension around them thickened like a living thing. Owen lowered his rifle just enough to let her pass. Sophia stepped into the lantern glow and lifted the collar, her fingers trembling not from cold, but from the weight of what she carried. "I opened the hidden compartment," she said, her voice low, urgent. There was a micro USB inside. Even Vincent paused, frowning. "USB? What the hell?" "Shut up," Sophia snapped, surprising everyone. The woman rarely raised her voice, but grief and truth burned behind her eyes. From her coat pocket she produced a rugged military-style tablet. Waterproof, shockproof, a device she still used since leaving the battlefield for the quiet life of treating injured animals. She inserted the tiny USB. The screen lit up. A video opened, and the world seemed to tilt. First came Lily's face, bruised, weary, eyes swollen from crying but still carrying that heartbreaking softness Owen had once adored. Her golden brown hair hung messily around her shoulders. She sat hunched on the bedroom floor, whispering into the camera as if afraid the walls themselves were listening. "If you're watching this, it means Nova is old enough to know." Owen felt the air leave his lungs. Beside him, Quinn's stern expression cracked, horror spreading across his features. Lily's voice trembled through the snowy silence. "Vincent and his father, they hurt me. They want my silence. They want Nova to grow without knowing the truth. But I'm so tired, and I don't have much time." Nova's muffled sob echoed faintly from below the cabin floor. She could hear everything through the boards. The video shifted abruptly. Shouts, then Lily crying, Vincent's voice spewing venom. The room tensed as the man in the video, younger but unmistakably Vincent, threatened her for daring to speak Owen's name. "You think of him. Even now. You still think he would save you." He shoved her. The camera shook violently. Owen gripped the porch railing until his knuckles whitened. The final file loaded, a recorded message. Lily's voice softened into a whisper. "If Nova knows the truth, tell her Owen is her real father, not the monster who owns this house." Vincent's face drained of color. "That's a lie," he hissed, but no one listened to him anymore. Sophia swallowed hard, her voice breaking. Lily hid the USB in Milo's collar. That dog carried it, protected it, until Nova found Owen. She planned everything. Suddenly, everything crashed at once. The deputies drawing weapons, Vincent lunging forward in panic, Quinn slamming him to the ground with a force belying his age. Dean and Marlowe dropped their weapons, hands lifted, terrified. Vincent howled like a trapped animal as cuffs clicked around his wrists. "You can't do this. You think anyone will believe her? I'm a ward." Quinn leaned close, his breath cold against Vincent's ear. "Not anymore." The storm stilled. Only the soft whimper of Milo and the faint sobs rising from beneath the cabin filled the air. Owen lifted the trap door and Nova bolted out, running straight into his arms. She shook uncontrollably as she clung to him. "Is it true?" she cried. "Are you—" Owen's voice faltered, but only once. "Yes," he whispered into her hair. "Your mother loved you more than anything, and she trusted me to protect you." Nova buried her face in his coat, tears soaking the fabric as the weight of all her fears finally drained away. Around them, the deputies hauled Vincent toward the cruisers while Quinn placed a reassuring hand on Owen's shoulder. "You did good, old friend," he said hoarsely. "You did real good." Owen stared at Nova, his daughter, trembling in his arms, and for the first time in decades, the ache in his chest eased. In one night, he had lost Lily all over again, but he had gained the last fragment of her light. Chapter ends here. Morning light returned to Silver Ridge in slow, hesitant breaths, as though the valley itself feared breaking a silence held for far too many years. The mountains, once smothered in winter's grip, now shone with thin streaks of sunrise, and the lake behind Owen's cabin rippled with the first hints of thaw. It was a gentle morning, one that carried no echoes of violence, no footsteps of men hunting through snow, only the soft patter of melting ice and the faint bark of a dog rediscovering joy. The trial of the Ward family had shaken the entire county. News vans had swarmed the courthouse, their long antennas stabbing at the clouds like metallic thorns. Inside, the gallery overflowed with townsfolk. Many who once whispered reverently about the Ward's influence now sat stunned as the full truth unfolded. USB footage extracted from Milo's collar became the cornerstone of the prosecution. No amount of polished speeches, bribed officials, or carefully crafted lies could erase Lily's trembling voice or the brutal scenes recorded in secret. Nova sat beside Owen throughout the hearings. She wore a modest charcoal sweater that made her look smaller, almost fragile, though her eyes, large and amber like lilies, revealed a quiet strength forged from surviving darkness. Each day in court, she braced herself with a calmness beyond her years, clasping her hands in her lap, knuckles pale with the effort not to tremble. Owen stayed close, the subtle shift of his broad shoulder always a wordless reassurance. His rough exterior, lined face, scruff along a hardened jaw, and soldier's posture, softened whenever he looked at her. And though the courtroom resurrected every wound he had tried to bury, he faced it all without stepping back once. Sheriff Quinn, though not called as a witness, attended the sessions with a rigid sense of duty. He stood quietly at the back, arms crossed over his barrel chest, gray hair neatly combed though his eyes carried exhaustion. Sophia testified calmly, explaining how she discovered the hidden compartment in Milo's collar. Her tone was firm yet laced with emotion, the way soldiers speak when honoring the dead. The judge, a stern African-American woman in her 60s named Judge Rosalind Maddox, presided with dignity. Tall, with silver hair braided into a low knot and a face marked by wisdom, she carried an aura of unwavering justice. When she delivered the verdict, her voice resonated like a gavel, striking the very walls of the courthouse. Vincent Ward Jr. and his accomplices are hereby convicted on all charges, including aggravated assault, unlawful confinement, child endangerment, and systemic abuse. The court finds sufficient evidence for extended sentencing. Gasps filled the room. Vincent's once confident posture collapsed, his blonde hair disheveled, cheeks blotched with rage and disbelief. Nova did not look at him. She kept her eyes on her hands, breathing quietly as if letting go of a weight she'd carried since birth. In the days that followed, legal guardianship passed officially to Owen. The paperwork felt like a formality, because something deeper than law had already taken root. Nova had chosen him long before the judge signed her name. The town, once silent about the Ward family's cruelties, offered support in unexpected ways. A neighbor brought firewood. A local teacher mailed Nova books she thought a 15-year-old might enjoy. And Quinn, though he said nothing sentimental, delivered a new lock for the cabin door and installed it himself. By the time spring arrived, the cabin looked different, not in structure, but in spirit. Sunlight filtered through windows Owen hadn't bothered clearing in years. Dust was swept, shelves repaired, and a small coat rack was added near the door, just tall enough for Nova's jacket. Milo, his wounds healed into thin silver scars, bounded through the yard like a creature reborn. His coat shone richly under the spring light, gold and black fur lifting in soft waves as he chased birds only he believed he could catch. One afternoon, the sky was painted with soft hues of honey and rose. The air felt warm, carrying the earthy scent of thawing soil. Owen climbed up to fix the cabin's old porch roof, hammer clenched in one hand. His movements were steady but slower than his youth, each swing betraying a stiffness in his shoulder from war injuries and harsh winters. Nova stood below, holding nails and tools with a seriousness that made Owen smile. "You don't have to help with every job," he said. "I want to," she replied simply. There was no tremor in her voice now. No shadow, just quiet certainty. When the repairs were done, they sat together on the porch steps. Milo curled beside them, resting his head on Nova's lap, tail brushing gently over Owen's boot. The lake shimmered in the distance, reflecting the sun like a promise. Nova took a breath, steady and soft. "Dad," she whispered, testing the word as though it were a fragile seed. Owen felt something inside him shift, breaking gently open. She continued, "I want to stay here, with you. This feels like home." For a moment, the world seemed to hold still. Even the wind softened, passing through the trees like a blessing. Owen turned toward her, placing a large, calloused hand on her shoulder. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The faint smile in his eyes, the kind that had been absent for decades, was enough. The long winter of his life had finally ended. And somewhere, far beyond mountains and memory, Lily's spirit must have been smiling too, because the two souls she had loved most had found their way back to each other at last. In the end, Owen and Nova's journey reminds us that even in the coldest seasons of our lives, grace finds a way to reach us. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like the steady courage of a wounded dog. Sometimes it comes as truth long buried, rising at the very moment we feel most alone. And sometimes it comes as a second chance, a reminder that God works through the people He places in our path, guiding us back toward healing, family, and hope. If you have ever felt lost or forgotten, may this story remind you that no winter lasts forever, and that the light that saves us often begins with a single act of courage, a single prayer whispered in the dark. Hold on to faith, because miracles still happen in the everyday moments. In kindness offered by strangers, in forgiveness that once felt impossible, and in the quiet love that slowly rebuilds what was broken. If this story touched you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments, pass the message forward by sharing the video, and subscribe for more stories of hope and redemption. May God watch over you and your loved ones, bring warmth to your home, and remind you today that you are never walking alone.